What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel, and it's time for another Mosh Pit review, where yours truly reviews an album that I either got the most votes for, depending on, or wanted to listen to right from the get-go. Now, there's still a poll currently going on the community tab of my YouTube page that have 5 albums up for grabs. As I Lay Dying, Borknagar, Dragon Force, Mourn, and Opeth. Whichever of those gets the most votes will be given a guaranteed video review. As of right now, it looks like Opeth is the frontrunner. As I Lay Dying is about a little bit behind, but Opeth looks like that's going to be the review for this upcoming weekend. But for this weekend, I wanted to get around to talking about an album that was really hyped up for me after I discovered, thanks to Mr. Death Metal 910 on YouTube and on Twitter, that he let me know that there was a new album coming out from this band, and I was like, holy crap, they're putting out their first album since 1992? And turns out it's true, and it finally came out on Friday. The brand new album, Mourn the Southern Skies by Exhorder. So, little context about Exhorder before we talk about the album. For those of you who don't know, Exhorder was a band formed out of New Orleans, Louisiana back in the mid to late 1980s. Starting out as playing very, very brutal thrash metal during their demo years, and then in 1990 they come together down to Tampa, Florida to record at More Sound Studios to record their debut album, Slaughter in the Vatican, which is often regarded as one of the best extreme metal debut albums of all time. It was very much a pioneering album of what's known as groove metal because of the breakdown parts, the mid-tempo sections, and even some doom sections within a thrash metal context. 2 years later, they put out an even more groovy album called The Law. Now, the thing that most people would know Exhorder for is the big rivalry, quote-unquote, between Exhorder and Pantera. Basically because both bands had similar sounds back in the early 90s in terms of, like, the riff writing, and especially on vocals. Phil Anselmo of Pantera and Kyle Thomas of Exhorder back then sounded so much alike you could have mistaken either one of them to be each other, and yeah, it was confusing. But vocally, back in the day, Kyle Thomas and Phil Anselmo were almost identical, very much identical to each other, to the point where if someone played you an Exhorder song, some people may mistake it for Pantera, down to the vocals. Now, of course, what I think separated Pantera from Exhorder was the fact that Pantera went into a more groovy direction as they went along throughout the 90s and early 2000s. Whereas after The Law came out, the band basically was dead for a long time. They got back together a few years ago to do, or last year, I want to say, to do some reunion shows, and then words started coming up of like, will they actually do another album, or are they just doing tours from now on? Well, we got our wish, and a new album is out. This is only their 3rd album, but it's their first since The Law, which was 92, so it's been 27 years since The Law came out. So this year has been a year for comeback albums, even if they were good or not. You know, you had Possessed, you had Sacred Reich, probably a couple others, Rammstein, another example, Tool, and now the latest trend, or the latest one in the trend, is Exhorder. So we get Mourn the Southern Skies, and the first single, which was the opening track, My Time, a very, very heavy thrash tune with some explicit lyrics, of course, stuff like go fuck yourself, I don't give a fuck. Basically, it's meant to be an anthem all about you not caring about what others say about you, and that you're going to go and do whatever you can to make something that you want to have happen. Which is an appropriate lyrical theme for that song, even if there's some F-bombs being dropped. I don't mind as long as the music's good. I don't care. My Time was an excellent opener and an excellent single when it came out. Very thrashy, and you know I love my thrash metal, so this got a huge 2 thumbs up from me. Then as you go along, it's like every couple of songs they go through a different style change. Like the 2 following songs, Asunder and Hollowed Sound, kind of fell into that more groove metal oriented sound from The Law, where it was more mid-tempo with some thrash riffs. But then again, groove metal is often seen as thrash mixed with mid-tempo speeds, with some thrash speeds here and there. But yeah, the 2 tracks after My Time certainly fit into that groove metal style, and they were well executed, fun to listen to. Beware of the Wolf, the 4th track, going back to the more thrash-oriented sound. Yesterday's Bones, which was the 2nd longest song of the album at 7 minutes, going a little more slower, kind of like a sludge metal kind of track, where there's some mid-tempo stuff, but there's also some very slow stuff on this song. And it had a great melody towards the second half of the song when the solo's going on. You're getting these like melodic riffs that really add character to the track and to the band, in all honesty. All She Wrote kind of continues that more groove metal oriented sound. Metal? What am I, from England? I wish I was, just for I don't know. But nonetheless, All She Wrote fitting more into the groove metal sound. Rumination, 4.5 minutes, kind of borderlining the groove and thrash of their sound. The Arms of Man, more of the groove. Ripping Flesh, which was actually the fastest song of the album, and the shortest at just a little over 3 minutes. The most thrashy song on the album that sounded like it could have been released on Slaughter in the Vatican, in all honesty. So yeah, up until we get to the final track, which I'll talk about here in a moment. But yeah, the first 9 tracks, kind of like a half and half situation. Like half of it's thrash, and half of it is groove. And I liked that contrast with this album because it's perfectly balancing the band's 2 primary sounds. The very fast thrash, and the fun, groovy, mid-tempo sound. But then we get a curveball with the closing track, the title track, Mourn, the Southern Skies. Longest song of the album at 9.5 minutes. Starts off with this beautiful acoustic part before it gets very, very dark. Probably the darkest song of the album, and you could call this the Exhorder's doom metal number. It's very doomy for a Exhorder track. Then again, Kyle Thomas, the vocalist, I think he's still in the band Trouble as the singer. So you could definitely tell that him being in that band sort of helped him get inspired a little bit when writing this song, because it's very doomy and kind of reminds me of bands like St. Vitus, Trouble, couple of bands within doom, but also a little bit of Down can be shown on this track too, and Down is another New Orleans band, so a little kinship there. And I just love how it also ends with the acoustic to close the album out with a beautiful acoustic part that you heard at the beginning. So, overall, the guitar playing, on point. Some of the heaviest guitar sounds out of a groove and thrash metal album that I've heard in a little while. Drum work, on point. Vocally, I was talking about this, funny enough, with Cover Killer Nation prior to recording this. We were both talking about how Kyle Thomas's voice has really aged over the years since The Law came out. It's to the point where you listen to this album, he does not sound like he used to. You can definitely tell his voice has aged, so now you can't mistake him for Phil Anselmo on this album, because he's got a completely different style of vocals going on this album, and especially on that title track at the end, going in a little more of like a soulful direction at the start, before going back to his typical cadence. Kyle Thomas's voice while I preferred his voice where he sounded like Anselmo, or like a doppelganger of Phil Anselmo, I will admit, his voice was still very good on the album, very aggressive, and especially on the title track, he shows his melodic side, and he's a decent, solid melodic vocalist, so there's that for you. So overall, how do I score the comeback album for Exhorder? Well, let me tell you. Maybe as of right now, until, say, if I listen to this album more and I end up liking it more than other albums, right now this is just on the outside looking in to the top 10 albums of the year. Which is why I'm going to give this album a 33 out of 40. Strong comeback for Exhorder. I certainly hope they make another album and see where they go from here. Because Exhorder is a band that I feel is very underrated, deserves so much more respect from heavy metal fans, because they're probably the best untold story band in the history of metal, because of the fact that when they put out records in the early 90s, they were coming out at the same time as Pantera was, and there's that little rivalry. Even though there was never a rivalry between the two bands, they loved and respected each other's work. It was among die-hard, hardcore metal fans that there was a rivalry, because it's like, well, who's better, Exhorder or Pantera? Both are great in their own unique ways. And that's all I gotta say about that to settle that debate. But what did you guys think of Mourn the Southern Skies by Exhorder? Let me know in the comments section below. As of right now, it looks like Opeth's going to be the next album I'm reviewing on here, and I certainly hope, or Borknagar would be fun too. But Opeth, I can't wait to hear that on Friday, considering the two singles we've had have been amazing. Dignity being my favorite of the two, and I love singing along to that track. Yeah, I can sing, guys. Don't forget about that. Anyways, thank you guys for watching. Peace out, and I will see you next time. And I know Hannah, I know her opinion about this, but I'm sorry. Number 4, Ghost prequel.
Screw you! Screw you! Die! Die! Okay.
Get out!
No, I cannot continue.
Now she's
Okay.
gone.
Hannah, I'm sorry. I'm gonna probably. That's my number 3 request.
You have no idea about music.
Okay,